It'll be.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to call to order the school committee meeting for the evening of January 18th. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Comments from the public? Seeing none?
Perfect.
Superintendent's report.
Okay, so I'll start with a COVID update. COVID continues to be quite challenging, but a little bit less so with regard to staff coverage. However, we are averaging still around 25 cases per day for the district. So we're still seeing an uptick in cases. Thank goodness for our nurses. They are spectacular in dealing with this, and can't thank them enough for what they're doing. We are noticing that there are some children that are being sent to school with symptoms, and so that does complicate things. I have sent out a communication reminding families to keep their kids at home if they are symptomatic, or if there are any other household members that may be COVID positive, because that is contributing to some of the contagion that we're seeing. Not necessarily school spread, but also what's happening outside. Today, Commissioner Riley released preliminary information about a new testing option for school students and personnel. And this is where every student and staff member who opts into this program will receive a test kit each week for at-home testing. This eliminates the need for extensive contact tracing in the schools, and it will pause the test and stay program, which we currently use. It also lifts the burden on our school nurses and some other staff who are utilized during the test and stay. Districts will have to make a decision whether or not they want to adopt this new type of opt-in testing by Friday. So starting with a count of how many staff members would like to participate. There's still a lot of information we'd like to get. This literally came to us this morning at 8:30 in a brief superintendent call with the commissioner, and then a press release to the media outlets. But tomorrow there is a webinar that will explain a little more about the logistical details about getting tests to districts, how to distribute, who is involved with the opt-in, record keeping, etc. There are lots of questions, and I hope that at least one or two of our school nurses will be able to attend with me so that we can hear that information and make a qualified decision. So on a good note, we did have another very successful vaccine clinic for the town of Nantucket. That was at NES on January 8th. Over 300 people above the age of 5 years old were vaccinated, so that's very successful. And we have another clinic scheduled on Saturday, January 29th. Same thing, first, second doses, and also boosters will be available. So I'll share that logistical information with everyone tomorrow in a press release, but also on our website. So
Which vaccine?
it's the Pfizer vaccine.
Okay.
So, and that is the COVID report. Anything that people would like to ask prior to me moving on to the annual report?
I have a question.
Sure.
So what if someone was contacted via email with a close contact, and they mentioned the dates they're in, and they weren't even in school,
So if they weren't even in school,
but they got an email from the district mentioning that they were in close contact, but they're in Vermont?
then it's very possible that it has to do with seating charts, because often the district uses seating charts to be able to reach out to families to identify close contacts. Possible that the name didn't come up or that it wasn't noticed that the person.
So was that student absent, or how did this family in Vermont get an email saying that your son or daughter has to be aware of they were in close contact, but they weren't even in school on the dates that were listed?
So they would, the best thing to do would be to contact the school nurse to explain the situation as to why they weren't there. And the school nurse would help the family to identify whether or not that person is even a close contact. That's
Okay.
that's what I would suggest.
I guess my question is, so if my son was listed as a close contact, why is he getting listed when this family was in Vermont and they were listed? And like, I don't get it.
So again, I would,
May I help out?
sure.
I apologize, but through the chair, if I could just help to answer his question. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fox, but I think what you're asking is that a student received a letter saying they were a close contact, yet
They receive the email.
Right.
The
email.
parents receive the email,
Yeah,
not the
what
student.
happens is that the school nurses use the seating charts that teachers provide, and we can't ask our nurses to check, attendance every single day, so they send an email to every student that's in that class that's been identified as a close contact.
Okay,
So if they weren't there, then it probably won't apply to them.
but I understand that, but sometimes when you get that email, they're like, okay, why am I even receiving this email?
Totally understand, because I've gotten 3 of those myself, and I think the same thing, because I wear my mask every single day. The best thing, as Dr. Hallett was saying, is that they just need to reach back out to either the nurse or to one of the administrators at the school, and we can help clarify.
Okay, didn't really answer my question, but thank you.
Okay.
No
Anybody
question.
I do have a question. So Beth, so this, if this goes into effect,
Mhm.
then the test and stay, it's essentially test and stay, but at home, essentially, right?
Yes, it's basically tests, and again, I'm still learning about this. We don't have, we have some information, but we'll be learning more things as we go on this week. Basically, tests will be given each week for families to use at home. The idea is that they are used, but they should be saved for having symptoms, whether or not they're feeling symptoms, or they have other members of the family that are positive, et cetera. Test and stay in school will not happen, but if there are, if someone continues to be negative, then they should be able to come to school. The problem is it's opt-in, meaning not every family will necessarily want to do this. Second of all, test and stay has to be paused, meaning we wouldn't continue with test and stay. It's either one or the other. The idea is that by offering tests, the idea is use the tests at home regularly so that we're checking to make sure that there are healthy students coming to school.
Right.
So
And alleviate
Yes.
that
now,
burden on the nurses as
yes,
well.
nurses are still expected to do symptomatic testing. So if someone has the sniffles, that child can still be tested in school, and if that child is positive, then they will be sent home, clearly. And then from that point, there is contact tracing that happens, if that happens. But if it's test and stay, and someone finds out that they're positive, then they stay home. We don't do contact tracing, and it's just the way, you know, you stay home. You've tested positive with a home test. So
Great, thank you.
sure.
Pauline?
Just a quick question on, as we're on COVID. I would imagine our teachers and our administrators, everyone are pretty fatigued with all of this COVID protocol and the stress of coming into a building, and certainly now as we're seeing our numbers increase. I know we have the employee assistance program, but are there other outreach that we're able to do for our staff and administrators? And I'm talking about everybody in the school building here, that we can make sure that we can offer or at least direct them to areas of support for them as they're going on. Because I would imagine, and I am hearing from some folks that they're hitting the wall because this is just going on. And it is for everybody, but I would like us to be able to recognize and be able to feel assured as a school committee that we are reaching out to our staff to support them the best that we can through this.
So at this time, all that I know of, and forgive me if, you know, I invite other people to share, but I do know that there is, that Ms. Sherry Lewis has looked into some work and some training on care for the caregivers. I don't know if that has come to fruition, if it's feasible or anything like that, but it may be a seminar or a workshop or something that might help. Obviously EAP, reaching out to Fairwinds, we have a strong connection with them. But other than that, I would say it's you know, we try very hard to make sure that they know that staff know that they're supported at all times, and administrators too, because it's tough as well. You know, our hope is that this is going to end in the next few weeks, and that we will see a little bit of a decline. it's mostly, where we're seeing things mostly are students. And so clearly we need to make sure that students are still following protocols and trying to maintain those protocols as best they can when they are not in school. And in some cases, that's difficult to do, so.
Thank you, Beth.
Sure.
I have one follow-up through the chair. You mentioned the students. One of the things that we had this week is when all the students were allowed into athletic events. So it's about the students, why you put so many multiple numbers in this one area?
So we discussed this carefully with Mr. Lombardi, our athletic director, and Ms. Vassal, principal. And one of the things that we thought was, we have a very strict policy about mask wearing, so we will expect that there is mask wearing at all times by students. They are close together in school, so they're 3 feet apart in school. They eat lunch together in the cafeteria, and our biggest concern is what happens outside of school. So if they're going to go to a game, wear a mask, be in a safe place where they're not necessarily maskless with friends, we feel that it is a worthwhile opportunity for them. We know that means a little extra site supervision, and both Mrs. Vassal and Mr. Lombardi assured me that that would be the case, that we would have a little bit better site supervision so that we can make sure that our students know that we're not joking when we say, you have to wear masks if you're going to be allowed to come to games.
So instead of 3 feet, you allow them to 1 foot.
We're trying to keep them as spread out as we can, that's clear, I know that is being communicated, but the alternative is that they will find places to be together and enjoy each other's company, in many cases without wearing masks.
I understand that. My point being is, why would you give them this opportunity to be in the school 1 foot apart?
Well, it's also a question of comparability to other districts, and almost all of the other districts that we play allow for student groups to come in. So we're trying to keep things as even as we can. There's a lot of discussion with other districts about what they're doing and what their the policies that they have in place, and we felt that it was only fair for them to have that opportunity. And again, they know that the expectations are for them to be masked at all times, and if we find that they're going to violate that, then we can shut it down. So,
Rocky, do you have an alternative?
yes.
Well, I guess we keep talking about other districts. Our district's different, because we're on an island. We're not Barnstable, we're not Falmouth, we're not DY, we're not Sturgis. Do I want all the kids in the seats to support their peers in sports? I'm just trying to figure out, when you say like we're trying to separate it, then you bring 50 kids in, or this close, to watch a basketball game, I'm not sure if I get it.
I think that you do the best you can, but why don't you go down the hockey rink and tell the hockey parents they can't come in? And as they chase you up the street with hockey sticks. You know, I think that we bring the kids in, you do the best you can. We can't put everybody in a bubble. There certainly is a finite risk of transmission, but you can't tell me that they aren't having parties on Saturday and Sunday night where they perhaps aren't wearing masks. So you do the best you can in that circumstance, Rocky. I mean, I think it is a real problem, but I think that you have a group of kids that are relatively low risk for getting significant complications from COVID, number one. Number two, you're doing elements of prevention with masks, plus minus vaccinations. So I think you're doing everything that you can. Kids are going to get together on the weekend. And I think you have a controlled atmosphere, and you try and control that as best you can. It's not perfect, but I think it's
Trust
the
me,
best you
I
can.
want all those kids in there to see the boys and girls
Sure.
athletic events. The reason why I present this, because it was presented to me from other
No.
parents, and that's what they asked.
No,
Wave them all in, because we have a great,
no, I think there's a finite risk, but it's by and large, a low-risk group.
okay?
And you're doing the best things you can in terms of prevention.
So if you're watching out there, I did raise your question.
Okay.
If I could add one more thing, and then I'll move on
Sure.
to the annual report. We do also have a pretty high vaccination rate at the high school. I would say, at the last count, which was in the beginning of the year, it was 83%, and I believe that it's gone up since then. So that's a good thing to be able to share, and I thank all of the high school students and their parents for being diligent about getting their vaccines.
Thank you very much.
Annual report. So, in 2021, the annual report was recently completed and submitted in a timely fashion to the town to be included with the other departments' annual reports for our annual town meeting, which is coming up on May 2nd. I want to start by thanking our school participants, those that all added parts of the plan, the annual report. And so that's our school principals, our district directors, and some other folks who assisted with the completion. And there were, as there are several new administrators, some of them were writing for about a year that they actually weren't yet in their position in the district, so that's always a bit of a challenge, but I appreciate their willingness to do a little bit of research in order to write what was pertinent during the 2020-2021 school year. To start off, you can all imagine that 2021 brought some very interesting things throughout the year. First of all, there were some great changes to administration, new superintendent, a new middle school principal, and new directors of special services, curriculum and assessment for humanities, and curriculum and assessment for STEM. The school year also was quite unique because it was a year of pandemic learning, and it included some students in person, some in hybrid learning, which meant in person on specific dates and remote on other days with cohorts, and some families were opting for full remote learning for their children. So school closures remained in place until October of 2020 due to COVID case numbers that had risen at that time. And there was another move to remote learning when Nantucket numbers peaked the first time in between Thanksgiving and the New Year. And in the spring, however, things did settle down and a routine with specific COVID protocols ensued. And finally, at the end of the school year, school did return to full in-person learning in mid-May. Although there were MCAS scores this past year, they were not included in this report due to the fact that testing occurred under such varied circumstances, and that the Department of Education recommended that the scores be used as a diagnostic to plan for interrupted learning instead of for accountability. Our English learners were also able to complete access testing on an extended access test schedule, but their scores are also only being used to inform important areas of needs in their language development. Throughout this report, each school and program did share individual experiences that happened throughout the year, such as, for example, but then also some successes as well. And one common success was the MAP testing that we adopted last year in grades K through 8 as a normed assessment. This assessment really helped indicate to us where there was a need for attention in looking at reading, writing, and math. There was also a lot of attention placed on social and emotional well-being of our students, as it became pretty clear throughout the year that our students struggled to engage when they were learning remotely at home. After the vaccine was introduced in March and the school staff were eligible to get it, the return to in-person learning was very well received by all students, families, and teachers. The facilities and grounds, technology, and the Nantucket Community School also all shared projects that were happening and programs that they were able to complete, but also they continued to focus on COVID-19 protocols with updated training and information gathering around health and safety. The tech department in many ways were really the unsung heroes of the pandemic learning year, and I would be remiss not to acknowledge their constant support and problem solving throughout 2020-21. Again, I hope we were able to capture the essence of a very unique and challenging school year, one that we had never experienced before, and I thank all of you who contributed. So I'll take any questions.
Catherine?
I have one question. Just about the MCAS. I was just wondering what the accountability data would entail.
So if you look on, and I can do this at one point, we can sit down and I'll show you how to find accountability data. Accountability for MCAS has to do with growth and how the district is improving and how the district is also in comparison with other districts around the state. So this year, the Department of Education did not include MCAS as part of accountability. In fact, there are no accountability reports this year because testing was not held in a uniform fashion. Everything was different. Some students took one test, some took another test. They weren't even necessarily the same test. Some did remote testing and some did in-person testing. So there was not a uniform way to be able to collect information, and it really did not shine a clear light on what our students' abilities were. So it just became something to use as to identify where the gaps were, to identify what interrupted learning still needed to happen. So accountability, though, is an interesting piece, and we'll certainly learn more about it once MCAS scores are counted and used as part of that rating.
Thank you.
Sure.
Rocky?
Yes, I have one question. Correct me if I'm wrong. With MCAS testing, if you scored high enough, you got free tuition to a Massachusetts State school.
That's the Adams, I think the Adams scholarships.
Now, is that dealing with the MCAS testing, or was that another testing?
So the MCAS testing that happened this year, I believe that there were still Abigail Adams offered. There were still scholarships that were offered. I believe we only had one recipient this year, from the MCAS from last year.
Okay, and moving forward with those other, is that offered this year as well?
It will be offered, yes.
Okay, thank you.
No questions.
Laura?
No questions, thank you.
Just, I'm shocked to learn that there's only one student that qualified for the Abigail Adams Scholarship. We normally have the whole ramp full of students, so I wonder what their benchmarks were on that, because that's...
I believe that it was difficult because, again, the MCAS was not a test that was given in a uniform way. I think overall there were fewer scholarships given across the state because of that, because they held to the same parameters when they should have made some
I was
adjustments.
going to say, it sounds like they should have made some adjustments.
I
It's
agree.
unfair for the students.
Mr. Howlett, not to interrupt.
Yes, please.
again, But just for clarity, we did only have one recipient last year, but we only had 5 juniors take it. They were not required to take it last year, it was optional. So we had 5 students who opted to take it with the anticipation that maybe they would earn the scholarship.
Okay.
Because they
That's-
didn't take it as,
a little bit better.
sophomores.
Right, because because they didn't take it their sophomore year, for their junior year, they had the option that if they wanted to take it, they could, but they were not required. It was a competency determination decision through the DESE.
All right, that makes that then a little bit more palatable. Thank you.
We had 20% that
Yeah.
earned it, so that was awesome.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, it was an interesting year for you, and you're still here, so I think we'll see some creative writing in the annual report, but
Oh, not it.
thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Tony Fox. My bad.
Okay, so I'd like to move on to the Town of Nantucket budget presentation from Libby Gibson and Brian Turbot.
Apologies, the computer fell asleep.
This is a lot of unicorns and pixie dust.
I'm to your left. apologize.
Old habits.
Again, my apologies, this is doing something different than I expected.
Right, before, don't go quite yet. Okay, so, is this, do I have to talk into that?
For the television, yeah.
Thank you so much for having us, we really appreciate it. I have with me our Director of Municipal Finance, Brian Turbot, and also our Budget Analyst, Maria Basheva. And Maria has done a massive amount of work on this, and this is her first budget year, so Maria, thank you so much. I wanted to let you know a couple of things before we start into this. We gave the Select Board almost this exact presentation. We're reducing it slightly for you all because a lot of our items probably aren't, no offense, that interesting to you because they're town items. But we gave this to the board on December 8th. The board had a couple of more weeks of discussion after that. They had a public hearing January 5th. And we had no public comment on the budget, and now we're here before you all, and then we will go to the Finance Committee over the next couple of months, beginning with a session with them for town departments on Saturday, January 29th. So, Section 4.2D3 of the town charter requires the town manager to prepare and submit to the Select Board an annual operating budget. So we're going to take you through this PowerPoint tonight. We also have a budget message, which is a very comprehensive document explaining a lot more detail about funding sources, expense items, and that can be found online, and we're happy to send you a link to it if so desired. We go through a process of what we call expense increase requests with the town departments and with the school, and the schools, you probably have your own way of doing that internally, but we communicate with the school early on about what you might be looking for with Martin and the superintendent, and we have done that this year, and I think reached an agreed upon number which is worked into the budget figures. We, on the town side, receive more expense increases than ever, and we obviously can't fund all of them, and we have to take our big picture into consideration. We have a lot of issues facing the town. We'll mention some of them here tonight, and you all, I know, have a lot of issues as well. So again, our intent tonight is to take you through the PowerPoint. It contains an overview of updated projections, our recommendations, next steps, and that sort of thing. Our fiscal '23 budget process begins with a review of preliminary projected expenses and revenues. We started that with the Finance Committee on September 13th. We reviewed those with the Select Board on September 22nd. We issued budget instructions to the town departments, including the school, on September 23rd. And internally, we reviewed every general fund department's budget from mid-October through November, and along the way, we, take in, seek out, review, analyze new or additional information. Okay, Jen, next slide, please, thank you. Our objectives for this budget are pretty much the same as in prior years with a couple of additions. We aim to always keep the operating budget within projected revenue, address priorities in the Select Board strategic plan. We are trying to address emerging and continuing public health issues, including PFAS, COVID, and presumably there will be more. Continued response to COVID-19. Project management and town infrastructure maintenance, and we really are hoping to maintain some flexibility with the levy limit, use of free cash in the budget. In other words, we are trying not to spend every cent of our projected revenue. We try to retain some for unexpected items that might come up to keep some flexibility in there. All right, slide 3. Yep, thank you. Initiatives specific to the board's strategic plan that are recommended in the fiscal '23 budget and/or are ongoing are shown on this slide. Priority initiative and opportunities, budgetary items are shown on the next slide, slide 4. You just go to that one. Some of these connect to the board's strategic plan, and we probably don't need to tell you all this, but we trying to emphasize this with the board. It will be important to dedicate sufficient staff resources to strategic plan initiatives in order to move them forward. We are working very hard to dedicate focus on retaining town employees. I'm sure you have some of the same issues we do. Staffing deficiencies and shortages are real across the country and the region. Our situation here, as we all know, is exacerbated by housing challenges. We have a variety of measures we're working to initiate, continue, or expand, and those, I think, is this slide 5? Are shown, go to the next slide, Jen. Those are shown here. Let's see here. Brian's going to take us through the next few slides, and then I'll come back in when we get to EIRs.
Next slide, Jen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present the budget tonight to the school committee. Next slide. So we are projecting the total revenue that we'll be able to raise in fiscal '23 is $121,679,000. Expenses, we're projecting $121,486,000, which would leave us approximately $193,000 with unused levy capacity. I can tell you right now, with the challenges with the solid waste enterprise fund budget, that most, if not all of that $193,000 will be needed to most likely close a gap on the annual basis, at least for this year, with the potential for a recommendation in the future of an override similar to what we did with our Island Home. Next slide, please. The slide here, excuse me, this slide will show the summary comparisons compared to fiscal '22 to fiscal '23. Simply, this shows a balanced budget of $121,486,000. Next slide, please, Jim. Thank you. This slide, as we do like to present, does break down all of the various revenue sources. As you can see, tax revenue from real and personal property taxes is the largest component of all the revenue we receive, with rooms and meals tax making up 7%, and then all the others, including local estimated receipts, as well as state aid, coming in between 1% and 3%. Next slide. This slide expands on the $121,486,000 in general fund expenses between school, municipal departments, non-departmental, and special appropriations. Non-departmental is debt service and health insurance and things of that nature. Special appropriations are the raise and appropriate for the Contract Review Committee for Health and Human Services, and transfers to our enterprise fund, as well as reserve and OPEB funding that we do on an annual basis. Through the next few slides I'll take you through, we'll just essentially break down the various high-level department fundings. So for total town operational expenses, we've projected $8,672,000. There's operational EIRs of $1,306,000 included in that $8,672,000. Salaries, we've included, projected and proposed $23,237,000, which does include $1,575,000 of personnel-related expense increase request. In discussion with the Chief Financial Officer from the school, we've projected and put forward $5,788,527 for operational expenses. Does include $187,000 of additional spending on a year-over-year basis, and school salaries of $28,638,000, which is an increase of $1,362,000 over the prior year's allocation at town meeting. Next slide. Thank you. For health insurance, we're projecting, it's actually slightly more than, the rate is projected to go up about 10.5% at this point, but it's a 7% on a year-over-year basis. $11,857,000 for active employees currently employed with the town, and retiree expenses of $3,952,000. One note with health insurance, when we do start this budget and go through this process, it's very early in the actual plan year that we're in. So we're still working with our health insurance advisor to see if we can actually get that 10.5% rate increase down. Since we are self-insured, it's all based on our own utilization. So we're working with them very closely, and we do hope that that might change. General insurance, $3,556,000, which is our property liability insurance, is a 17% increase. We're hoping we can get it under that, but with the number of catastrophic storms across the country, hurricanes, things of that nature, our risk profile, being an island, is mainly related to wind. So our insurance companies have now started pricing that accordingly to their modeling, which we do work very hard over the next 6 months to keep that to as low as an increase as possible. Debt service is based on an amortization schedule. This year it's $11,189,000. Retirement, again, is also from Barnstable County is on a projected funding schedule to have the retirement unfunded liability completely funded by 2036, so that's $6,299,000. And enterprise fund subsidies of $11,790,000, which is the Our Island Home and the Solid Waste Enterprise Funds. We've projected for Health and Human Services, which is what the Contract Review Committee does review on an annual basis and make recommendations for awards, $750,000. County assessment is up 2.5% on a year-over-year basis to $178,000. We've made no change to the recommendation for reserve fund, unpaid bills at $20,000. Hopefully that will be substantially less. OPEB is $500,000, is consistent with our funding strategy with the exception of the 1 year for fiscal '21 when we didn't make the contribution due to COVID. Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we've proposed the same $1,625,000. In Article 10 funding for them, there is $485,000 included in our Article 8 operating budget as well. Cherry sheet charges, which is the offsets to state aid, which primarily for the town of Nantucket is made up of the NRTA, is $1,132,000. Community school, we've made a recommendation and proposal for $550,000, which at the request of the school administration was increased by $50,000 over last year's allocation. And then we have in the town what's known as minimum capital funding requirement. That comes in this year at $1,070,000. Every year annually we raise that in the tax rate to apply to Article 10 for capital funding. Do you want, I'm gonna go here still, right? Yeah. This is 12, I think. So I'll start with this and then the town manager will take you through some of the specific requests. As the town manager noted, we received $5,810,000 of requests. $692,000 of those were one-time requests. $5.1 million were ongoing on an annual basis requests. We've recommended $3,630,000 of those requests. We have funded all the one-time requests of $692,000, and we have proposed funding $2,938,000 of the ongoing expense increase requests. These are to be funded through available tax levy, any budget adjustments, any alternate funding sources, which could be ambulance reserve, waterways, beach revolver, free cash, and then any potential revenue increases, which we haven't proposed at this time. This is where I jump on. 1 minute.
I won't be long on this because we weren't going to take you through all of our EIRs, but we just wanted to mention that our recommendations for EIRs are based on the following criteria. Whether or not the item is a legal mandate, does it improve departmental operations or efficiency? Is it necessary to support new programming or existing programming? Does it provide continuity of operations? And we give high priority to requests that support the board's strategic plan and or are recommended in the staffing study that we had done 3 years ago. Each EIR is ranked using a point system. And again, we aren't really going to take you through all these. If you have any questions about it, we're happy to answer them, but they are also explained in detail in our budget message. Okay, you use this.
Next slide. So how do we get to that $3,630,000? In the tax levy and other general revenues, $2,784,000 will be raised. Free cash of $692,000 will be used to fund one-time expense increase request, which is consistent with the town's policy. Special revenue funds, in this case, is ambulance reserve and waterways, $153,900, that's beach revolver, I'm sorry. All told, $3,630,000 of funded expense increase requests. Free cash. The number up there, please don't everybody get married to it. It's one of the largest numbers that we've ever had in the community, and I can assure you that we will never see a number like this again. It's strictly due to the uncertainty of COVID and how much better many revenue accounts did than we expected. We're projecting $16,258,000. We are proposing funding $692,000 of one-time town expense increase requests. We have proposed and support $200,000 of a one-time expense increase request in the school budget. We are still working through funding out of free cash, the town and school capital requests. Those are still going through the entire process with the CAPCON. Unpaid bills we typically pay out of free cash, that would be 20,000. We also most likely will make recommendations to fund something into our general fund stabilization fund and then our capital stabilization fund. We'll also make a recommendation, I will make one to the town manager, that we potentially consider catching up for the fiscal 21 other post-employment stabilization fund payment, and then we are going to propose funding a portion of the accrued vacation and sick leave liability that the town has on the books through this, so that we don't have to take it out of the operating budgets. Free cash is been delayed, admittedly, partially because as they get closer to setting tax rates, they put free cash to the side as they do that, because tax rates are the most important due to the 12/31 deadline. But the DOR is also facing the similar staffing shortages that we face and everybody across the country has faced, and they have a reduced workload and limited overtime. So we expect that it will be hopefully finalized by the end of this week at the latest. Next slide.
Brian, you said the DOR has a decreased workload, but I think you meant decreased workforce.
I did, I'm sorry.
Increased workload, as all of us have. As an aside, I was on a Cape Cod managers meeting last week, and several towns were reporting higher than normal free cash numbers because of those exact same things that Brian mentioned. Outstanding items and current unknowns. Just wanted to take you through this. State aid is always a concern. The state has not finalized its budget yet for fiscal '23. It does seem like it most likely will be level funded. Harbor Place is a project at the town level that is a bit unknown at this point. None of the citizen articles that have been submitted for the 2022 annual town meeting are included in our recommendations. Some of these articles have specific dollar amounts associated with them, and some do not, but they would have a cost impact if adopted. And I just really want to emphasize that those costs are not in the budget. And we've had some citizens in prior years express some level of surprise that their item wasn't budgeted, but it never gets budgeted unless or until the Finance Committee so recommends and it's so voted at town meeting. PFAS costs remain a high concern and also largely unknown. The ongoing impact of COVID-19 also needs to be monitored. As noted in our budget message, which I'm sure you all will read later, we have not had what yet could be considered a normal year of short-term rental revenue since the expansion of the room occupancy tax to short-term rentals in 2019. Additionally, the impact of any future potential town regulations on short-term rental is obviously unknown. Supply chain and labor issues are having a noticeable impact on town operations. I'm sure you all are experiencing that as well. We really do not know when those will at least be alleviated. Again, it's not a problem unique to Nantucket, except for the fact that our housing challenges for municipal employees are significant. At the Select Board's December 1st meeting, we had a presentation of the Coastal Resilience Plan, which has since been endorsed by the board. The costs associated with the projects contained in that plan are astronomical, and we will need to prioritize those and seek alternate sources of funding wherever possible. As we had noted in our budget message, it will be a town admin recommendation, most likely for fiscal '24, that a permanent operating override be sought for the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. There is not enough revenue in the general fund or the solid waste revenue coming in to fund a proper solid waste management program for the island. Given the increasing regulatory requirements, PFAS, programs needed to reduce waste going into the landfill, and overall focus necessary for the solid waste facility and planning efforts. The cost of that operation is quite significant. Free cash, Brian just talked about. Collective bargaining negotiations, we still have some outstanding contracts on our end. And while we have projected an increase for the retirement assessment, we have not yet been formally notified of it, I don't think, by the Barnstable County Retirement System. Next slide, thank you. Just some future potential costs for everybody to keep in mind here. We have discussed most of these within the last year. In addition to employee recruitment and retention potential costs, because succession planning could be a cost as well. I'm sure you all are going through some of those issues with retirements of longtime employees and things of that nature. I won't go through all the items. Next slide. Next steps, so this wasn't quite updated, but, actually, I'm sorry, yes it was. We're here tonight before you, again, from around now till mid-March. The FinCom reviews all of the general fund and enterprise fund budgets, and there are a number of other financial appropriations, and then we conclude with town meeting starting on Monday, May 2nd. I think that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Rocky?
No questions, sir.
Kathy?
No questions.
No questions, thank you. So, it's a thing, no questions, and thank you for the thorough presentation.
Run.
Thank you.
It's a recent thing, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We really
Yeah.
appreciate being able to come before you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for coming.
Martin, you're up.
Good evening. This is a presentation of the second quarter update for our expense and revenues for the school district, for the community school, and also for the performance of the school lunch program. So as you see from the charts and that you have in front of you as a comparison, expenses this year are up by $1,012,000 as of the end of the second quarter, December 31st. And those are mostly driven by contractual obligations for salaries, $291,000, as well as a lot of PD travel that resumed this year as compared to last year, athletics travel, and also some professional services for effective school solutions for the special education department, and other expenses as well. It's the total budget right now is expanded at 47%, which is typical for this time of the year. Last year, at this time, at the end of the second quarter, it was at 46% expanded. And payroll is expanded at 37%, which is the same as last year. It's a relatively normal year finance-wise. I think the increase is normal at this stage of the year, and we haven't had any extraordinary expenses this year to report like we've had in the past years, HVAC repairs, as you remember, for 2 years, and others. We're closely monitoring with the Director of Facilities, Diana O'Neill, the utility costs. As you've probably noticed, and you've gotten notifications from the suppliers here on the island. National Grid, for instance, sent an update that electricity cost might be going up. So we're monitoring that. We've budgeted an increase for next year for 2023. And but at this point of the year, so far we are on budget. So that's for the public school. The community school increase is at this point it's showing $107,000 increase in revenues. The actual increase is 157 because the subsidy went down this year as opposed to FY21. From $550,000 to $500,000, and as you just heard, the town is bringing that back to $550,000 for FY23. Community school has resumed operations, so obviously expenses are up as well, upwards of $63,000, of which $28,500 was for the purchase of a new vehicle, which is now registered and used, and also there is close to $35,000 increase in medical health insurance costs. You probably saw, again, just to refer it because it was a convenient timing, obviously, with town presenting tonight. Health insurance is a major expense in the general fund budget. It doesn't hit the school budget per se, but the community school is responsible for paying the medical insurance costs for their employees. So that is part of the increase in expenses. We keep monitoring. We communicate monthly. At least monthly with the community schools director and business manager. So it's a much better year than last year. It's getting somewhat closer to being back to normal operations. School lunch program Deficit right now is at $93,000 and change as compared to $149,000 or close to $149,000 a year ago. I believe it's going to go down, and I'll tell you. And we just got actually positive news on Friday after this update was sent. State is increasing by 24 cents the reimbursement rate for lunches and by 14 cents for breakfast. So we've seen this year much bigger increase, obviously, in meals served because we're in person every day. Kids are in school, so and meals, as you know, are free this year. So we've grown to $54,000 lunches served as opposed to 13,500 last year, and breakfast numbers are at 7,600 compared to 3,200 last year. So these higher participation rates are leading to higher reimbursements, and we're hopeful that we'll be in a much better place at the end of the year. So with that, I'll open it to questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
In 2019, Martin, what was the travel budget for the athletics?
The travel budget for the
Yeah.
athletics?
I mean, so you have it now. I'm just saying, like, I know I know Travis and Mr. Murray had a tough time getting buses. Did they raise their rates for you guys to travel, or where is it now?
In 2019, I believe that budget for athletics stays around $150,000. Last year we didn't obviously travel much, so because there were no games. We usually go over that budget, and that's pre-programmed because the athletics department also has the athletics revolver, where all the user participation fees are. So we can fall back to that, and that usually brings in around $100,000 a year. So we've had no issues covering the costs of transportation in the past 6 years I've been here. But the rates, are they going up? We just had to increase the hourly rates for our bus drivers in district with Cape Cod Collaborative. So my assumption is yes. And with gas prices being higher, we anticipate to see higher transportation costs. But again, we are in a good place to cover that when we consider both the athletics revolver and the operating budget.
I'm all about that. I'm all about the athletes.
Catherine?
No questions.
No questions, thank you.
Holly?
Couple of questions. Just to be clear for everybody at home who's listening to this, the deficit that you talk about with the school lunch program, because it is free to our students and families this year. The deficit is the cost that we are paying to provide, and then what we're getting reimbursed from the state. Is that accurate?
That is exactly what it is. Thank you for the question. Yes, and we have a budgeted subsidy which we cover through the general fund, through the school operating budget, and it's this year I believe it's $93,000. We're well within that. I believe it's going to be lower, so we have a budgeted amount to cover this discrepancy. Every year, regardless of whether we are in this pandemic or beforehand, we've had it. It's grown though. It used to be around $55,000 budgeted subsidy to the school lunch program, and right now obviously it's 93. But I don't anticipate anything close to what happened last year when we ended up upwards of $220,000 deficit.
How does the state come up with how they reimburse us?
They have a predetermined formula, and that formula is based on a national average when they include the costs of providing a meal. So they take this into consideration, and that's a reimbursement rate for free meals for districts that obviously provide them. There is districts that provide that are 100% free meals for the whole district. So they are supposed to cover the costs of the school lunch program through these reimbursements. So they try to stay as close to as possible to the market of preparing, and it's a formula that includes, like I said, it takes into consideration the state, and I think for now this rate is not going to stay that high. It was 364 last year, so we are seeing it at 456 now. I assume next year is going to be lower because as you know, it's 450 for us to sell the lunch. So right now we're getting 6 cents more as a reimbursement rate. I believe this is because of the pandemic, and they're trying to help districts get through this, because last year, like I said, was a big hit of over $220,000.
So our reimbursement is tied to our free and reduced percentage of families that we, I mean, it's not an exact science, but that comes into play, into the formula.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is
Okay.
correct, yes.
Last question, I'm just curious if you know, do enterprise funds pay for their own health insurances for their staff?
They do, yes.
They do.
When I when I worked for the town, yes, that was part of their own budget. So, for instance, our Island Home, a place like, and it's a major cost driver, obviously. So, but they do. To your question, yes, very similar to the community school. They are operating like an independent budget, and they have to cover these
That's
costs.
where I was going. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Okay, community discussion and votes to be taken. Let's start off with a vote to improve the school improvement plans of NHS, CPS, NIS, and NES.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
A vote to approve donations from Mr. Joseph Torme of $1,000, the Mass Audubon Society of $750, and Island Lumber Company of $1,000 to the Nantucket High School Woodshop Program. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
A vote to approve the donation from the Nantucket Land Council to CPS for grade 8 science materials for DNA extraction and community night program in the amount of $202,550.67.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve donations from the Community Foundation for Nantucket, the Nantucket Hospital Community Health Fund, to the Nantucket Community School for medical translator training in the amount of $20,500.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve donations from the Community Foundation for Nantucket and the Josh and Bernadette Brown to Nantucket Community School for Learn to Swim program in the amount of $1,000.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
January 4th meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Oof. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Transfers and invoices.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Subcommittee work group. Has anybody been doing anything?
Nothing yet.
Negotiations continues. Safety and security meeting is when?
Tomorrow,
Tomorrow?
6:45?
tomorrow, 9 to 10:30.
Who's our safety and security person?
I believe it's, Rocky, are you part of that? Safety and safety and
I didn't get one of those 9 emails.
So, we'll have to-
Am
I'll
I
have
on
to
that?
look.
Excuse me, Logan? She said she would get back to me on that.
Okay,
I don't think I'm on that one.
okay. Student
Am I?
council,
I stand corrected, or I sit corrected, sir.
Catherine?
9:45? AM?
9 AM, high school cafeteria.
Catherine?
Full day tomorrow. Hi,
Um,
Catherine.
Hi. In the previous meeting, I accidentally said that the end of the quarter was January 26th, but that is the 28th. I accidentally mixed up the dates with the 26th as being student-led conferences. So that's a Wednesday. It will be a half day. Students will set up meetings with their advisor, and also parents can come as well. But students can also just set up individual meetings with their advisor if they wish to have to have discussions on their assignments and work throughout their classes, to like work on like skills of the graduate, which include like communication, collaboration, critical thinking, social responsibility, reflection and adaptation, and innovation. So they will have like thorough discussions with either their parent or their advisor on how they demonstrate those skills in school. And The other thing I have is that the annual Wintertide Art Show is happening January 27th from 5 to 7 p.m. And I believe it's in the basement in the art room.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's all I have to report. So.
What were the attributes again?
Oh, yeah, I can.
Catherine.
So it's communication, collaboration, critical thinking, social responsibility, reflection and adaptation, and innovation.
Okay.
Can I ask
Good.
a question in
Sure.
regards to that? So Catherine, you're saying that the students meet with their advisory teacher. Is that, when you say advisor, it's whoever
Yeah.
their advisor?
I believe it's mostly supposed to be with parents, but if the student wishes, they can just set up individual meetings with their advisor to, like,
Okay.
talk and discuss on it.
I'm just curious, because I know this is the model, but I'm just curious, as you brought it up, how much an advisor would know of the students in their advisory. I'm just thinking that class
Lots.
teachers would have more information perhaps on how they're doing and whether they are collaborative and you know what I mean? I'm just curious, but.
I think it's, as a son is a junior, her advisory, his advisory, and his teachers, it's symbiotic. It's lots.
And also, if I
Very
may add,
beneficial to me as a parent.
the student is mostly going to elaborate on themselves. It's like a self-reflection
Mhm.
on if they demonstrate the skills or not, and like strengths and weaknesses and what they can improve on.
So they're presenting it pretty much to their
Yeah,
parents with the
basic.
advisor there
Mhm.
as a guidance.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
exactly.
Questions?
I do have a question. Catherine, where are those standards derived from that you mentioned?
I believe, yeah.
So
I
this
would
is
defer
through
to-
NEASC. It's the vision of a graduate, which is what it was created in the last NEASC visit where NEASC came to the high school. And so these are the components of vision of a graduate. So that's the idea, is that student-led conferences would be around these specific components, and the advisors would assist students in helping them to create a portfolio and help with explaining how these attributes are being demonstrated in school classes, so.
Great.
Ms.
Thank you.
Marano?
No questions.
Pauline?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda for the next meeting tomorrow night.
Yes, we will be meeting tomorrow at 6 PM for the FY '23 budget hearing, public hearing. And then our next meeting is on February 1st. We will look at the Student Success Program, which is also it's also called Alt Ed. School Committee will look at progress on their goals, and then on February 8th, we will look at a school committee workshop on the campus master plan. So that's what we're looking at for the next two meetings.
Good.
Through the chair, I have one question. So tomorrow, this meeting is to the 6 o'clock meeting, but is it also not a 6:45 meeting with the master plan committee at night?
So that is for, yes, it's open to anyone, but we have asked for parents of athletes, and so it's open to whoever would like to go, but clearly it's also, that's who it was
I'm
designated for.
not asking as a school committee member, I'm asking as a son
As
who's
it-
an
yep,
athlete.
yes, please come, we'd love for you to come, it's
And that's
explain
open
the program.
forum?
Yep,
Oh,
it's
boy.
information.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Can we have a motion to adjourn for a short while?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.